to let millions upon millions of people into the country because he did not execute the laws.
I thought that you were going to squirm out of that question.
I'm not squirming.
Yes, you did. And that's why I prepared for it, because I want to read you something.
That every immigrant here is the same. You can't believe that because
Yes.
they're not. They're not.
I do.
There's some good, there's some bad. There's some criminal,
I
they're
believe,
not.
I believe
And
every...
how Trump doesn't even want to give him even that due
He didn't
process.
say that.
I mean, I think
He
that's
said
part of the problem.
He is not sure the level to which they are entitled.
She didn't ask
to
about
due
what
process,
level
which is
of due
completely
process.
accurate. Another dime of my taxpayer
not
dollars
supposed to be
to go to.
removed.
He was
I don't-
not
I don't-
supposed to be sent to
Listen,
El Salvador.
let's
he
was.
had a deportation.
Let's put Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the side.
No, but you follow the Supreme
He
Court,
said, I will
right?
follow the Supreme Court,
You heard him
period.
commit to
You
that,
heard him.
right?
He was asked about the Constitution, correct? He was asked about the Constitution.
He was
Generally speaking, do people deserve to at least say, hey, that's not me?
Absolutely.
That's a pretty basic question. If someone came to you and said, oh, Scott Jennings, are you the Scott Jennings from Colorado who committed a murder? Wouldn't you want to raise your hand and say, Your Honor, that's not me?
Well, I'm not a foreign terrorist, and I
someone-
didn't come here
But
illegally.
everybody in this.
Hello, everybody. Guys, there's a lot to get through in this segment, so let's just get right into it and we'll talk about it.
Dante, I don't think it requires a law degree to understand what the Constitution says. Is it just me? It seems like that's kind of a cop-out for just the plain text, which actually, if you're conservative, that is how they read the document.
The simple answer should be, I will follow the Constitution, especially if you're the president of the United States. But I want to have a logical conversation. And there's a quote that Donald Trump said. He said, I was elected to get them the hell out of here, and the courts are holding me back from doing so. That shows his rationale. He thinks that the courts are acting against him, but the court's job is not to advance or to fight against the presidential policy. It's to make sure that they interpret these laws with fairness. And the one thing the courts do that I think President Trump is missing here, the courts determine or look at, what if you're wrong? What if they're not a criminal? What if they're not a gang member? What if they're not an immigrant? They're an American citizen, and you put them in jail anyway, and all of that has happened. The impact of that far outweighs the time it would take to just have a hearing. And that's what due process is.
So here's the deal. We've let 20 million something people into the country illegally. And now what a lot of folks want to do is use the court system to try to stop as much as possible the rapid deportation of illegal aliens from the country. What the president said in the interview was very clear. He was unsure on these deportation cases because of the unusual circumstances, but he was going to defer to his brilliant lawyers and said, quote, we are going to follow what the Supreme Court says. There is no outrage here that's worth it. But we have been invaded by millions upon millions of people, and he was elected to get them out. He was elected to get them out. And what some people are proposing is a backlog system that will never allow us to go to get them out.
You're describing illegal immigration, which has been around for a long time as an invasion, which is fine for you if you want to do that. But why is that unusual that there's a process to go through to deport people? I mean, that's actually just how the system works.
Do you know how long it takes for this process, this paperwork to get people out? The guy that we've all been weeping and gnashing teeth over, the guy we sent to El Salvador, was in the country 14 years illegally.
But what about what
We've got
Dante's-
millions of people who have gamed this system,
But what
and
about
now
what
we're going to
Dante-
give it
Either you
some more.
believe in the Constitution or you don't. And
I believe in the sovereignty of the United States, or you don't.
But
So you don't believe in the
do you believe in the
I
Constitution?
believe in the sovereignty of the United
So you
States,
don't
and I
believe in the
believe, and I believe we've
And
been
you don't
invaded.
believe that
Can
Donald
I just
Trump
ask a
should
question?
abide by the Constitution?
Just a serious question.
Of course I do.
Do you
And of
believe-
course I believe.
Do you believe that he does?
And I believe that he will follow, just as he said, what the Supreme Court says. But the policy debate is worth
From the
having.
very beginning,
millions
of Trump,
upon millions of
when
people are
Trump
here, and they will not
campaigning,
leave, and he has to get them out.
always
I agree with you with
believed
that, Scott.
in executive
Hold on a
overreach.
second, Dante. Let me just let her
Always.
finish.
From the very beginning, from 2016, he has believed in executive overreach. We've all seen that. He said it. It was clear. Are you saying now that you don't believe that he believes in executive overreach?
I believe that he believes his mandate from the American people is to solve illegal immigration. And I would ask you the same question in reverse. Did Joe Biden, when he said he would faithfully uphold and execute the laws of this land, not mean it when he decided to let millions upon millions of people into the country? Because he did not execute the laws.
I thought that you were going to squirm out of that question.
I'm not squirming.
Yes, you did. And that's why I prepared for it, because I want to read you something. At the core of Trump's candidacy is a call for greater executive authority with willful disregard for the constitutional limits placed on our chief executive. Trump especially promises to force individual companies to do things he wants them to do, or else he promises punishment to those who displease him, which appeals to the miserable man at the airport bar. Do you recognize that?
Yeah, I wrote it.
Exactly.
And here's
so
the deal.
what he hasn't
And
changed.
here's
So
the
what has changed about you?
And here's the difference between then and now. This country has been invaded. The president was elected
So
to
you
end the
changed your
invasion.
opinion on the Constitution?
My opinion is the president needs to pull every lever he can to solve illegal
So
immigration.
you've answered
crisis.
that question by saying
here's
you
the
don't,
question.
you don't mind him
John,
being
do you
unconstitutional.
I want to say something that I think is clear, but it isn't said at all. I think Scott Jennings, like most Republicans, knows this won't affect him or anyone that he cares about, if he cares about anyone. Let's be real. He knows they're going after Hispanics, not anyone that looks like him. Scott doesn't care because he doesn't care about that skin color. It's that simple to me. Let me give you a thought experiment. Scott goes crazy defending Jewish people and anti-Semitism and gets very animated about it. I would have loved if someone asked Scott if they started deporting Jewish people without due process because they saw him as a threat for whatever reason. This guy would lose his mother effing mind. I mean, what do you call that other than racism? Batya would lose her effing mind, the female Scott Jennings. Because in their minds, they believe some groups are good, some groups are bad. And can you guess what skin colors they think are good? Which ones are bad?
That every immigrant here is the same. You can't believe that because
Yes.
they're not. They're not.
I do.
There's some
I
good,
believe
there's
every-
some bad. There's some criminal,
I
they're
believe,
not.
I believe
And how do
everybody
you-
who's here
but-
illegally
hear
is
this
here
out.
illegally.
How do
Not
you
all are
differentiate?
violent, but all are here
But
illegally.
how do you differentiate if nobody gets a hearing, if you don't have due process? How do you distinguish one from the other?
Well,
so what you're saying is every person that's here in this country is a criminal, is a gang member,
No.
should be thrown in jail.
Every person who's
That's
here
what's
illegally,
happening.
every person who is here illegally is in fact a criminal. Some of them do come here and commit violent crimes
Some of
and
them,
still
but how do you
aren't
differentiate
deported.
if you don't have a
Well,
process?
some have records and some don't.
But they
I'm
still
here to
have
break the news.
constitutional rights.
They're all
Hold on,
going
hold on a
away.
second.
Still have constitutional
I want to make
rights.
sure that we're not straying from the point of this conversation, which is a question about due process rights. And so I'll just ask really quickly, do you believe that undocumented immigrants have to have due process rights, that that's constitutionally what they are entitled to?
I'm unsure of what that means in the context of some of the cases that we've been dealing with in the news lately, because I've been looking at these people who have been here for 14 years, have been through
Okay.
numerous immigration.
All right, well,
I
let
have
me
a question
just,
about
all
what
right,
does
well,
that mean?
all right.
Yes,
well,
I agree, but what does it mean?
Let me bring the Supreme Court into this since you brought them up. This is what two different Supreme Court justices have said about this issue in the past.
Do undocumented immigrants have the 5 freedoms?
Oh, I think so. I think anybody who's present in the United States has protections under the United States Constitution.
The 14th Amendment, it doesn't speak of citizens, as some constitutions grant rights to citizens, but our Constitution says person.
persons.
And the person is every person who is here, documented or undocumented.
Batya, I wonder why it's so difficult to understand a pretty simple concept. If Trump wants to deport illegal immigrants, he can do that, but he ought to do it legally. Do you think that that is a fair thing to say at this moment?
I do. I do think the media is pulling another, dictator for a day hoax right now, because it's clear when Trump said, I don't know, what he meant was what he finished his sentence saying, which is, I don't know where the Supreme Court is going to come down on whether deporting these illegal migrants is constitutional or not. It's very obvious, yet every
hold on.
single
All right.
headline...
You just called it a hoax, so let's just play. Can
Let's
we play
play
it
it.
again
Yeah.
in the control room, what Trump said in response to Kristen Walker?
Guys, there's like a 10-second wait here. But actually, real quick, I know we despise Scott Jennings and Batya, the brainless there, but I think it would be almost an injustice not to show them and show more normal Republicans, because they are much more representative of the majority of Republicans. This is who they are. And they're easy to insult. So, like, to me, that's a win-win. But let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. I know they're annoying. I know they bring nothing. But this is representative of the Republican Party, as annoying as it is.
We're getting it up right now.
Can I make
Don't you
another
need
clip?
to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know. I have to respond by saying again, I have brilliant lawyers that work for me, and they are going to obviously follow what the Supreme Court said.
What's wrong with that?
So the Supreme Court is going to decide what is constitutional and what is not. And Trump just committed 100% to following what the Supreme Court says. I want to make one more very quick point.
There's another clip. Do we have the other one where he talks about whether citizens deserve due process? If we do, let's play that one.
Your Secretary of State says everyone who's here, citizens and non-citizens, deserve due process. Do you agree, Mr. President?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know.
Well, the Fifth Amendment says
I don't know. It might say that, but if you're talking about that, then we'd have to have 1 million or 2 million or 3 million trials.
So can I respond to that?
Yeah.
So what does it mean for an illegal immigrant to have due process? We would all agree that they do not have the same level of due process that we do. For example, we are entitled to a jury trial, and they are entitled to a hearing before an immigration judge. Do you know who the immigration judges work for? They work for the executive branch. They work for, which means that they work for Donald Trump, which means that he is in charge of the due process that they get.
But Donald Trump doesn't even want to give him even that due process.
I
mean, I think that's part of the problem.
Not sure the level to which they are entitled.
She didn't ask about what level of due process.
That's a very basic statement.
No, I mean, the reason I'm jumping in here is because she did not ask him should they have a jury trial? Should they not have a jury trial? She just said whatever process they are entitled to. If they're immigrants and they're in an immigration proceeding, then yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a different type of proceeding. It's actually more of an administrative proceeding.
It's a much lower standard as well.
Even still, they are trying to circumvent that minimal amount of due process.
Then why does
and
it
the
take so
question
long?
is,
let me give you
why?
an example. I'll give you an example. In the example of Kilmar Obrego Garcia, I believe he already got his due process.
Yes.
He had a deportation
No
order.
one cares what you believe.
So for Trump to be asked, does that man deserve more due process? I think the answer is absolutely not. I don't want another dime of my taxpayer dollars to go to. He was not supposed to be sent to El Salvador. He had a deportation.
Let's put Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the side.
No, but I'm just using him as an example
I know that you are.
of someone who
I
Trump
also
could
think
very legitimately say
Okay.
does not need any more due process.
Well, it's not Trump's.
She doesn't want her taxpayers to spend another minute on due process, but completely fine that those dollars going to commit a genocide. She is disgusting, and I'm sick and tired of the constantly trying to connect undocumented immigrants with gangsters and violence and immigrants. When again, they know undocumented immigrants commit crimes at a lower rate than Americans, and they're overwhelmingly over here working hard, keeping their heads down, and doing jobs that most Americans don't want to do. And these idiots constantly talk about growing the economy. How do you do that? You need more people. At least that's one of the ways. Undocumented immigrants paid $26 billion into Social Security last year or the year previous without getting any of the benefits from it. And these moron Republicans, they also want people to have more kids, but don't help with that. No paid family leave, no child tax credit, no tax increases for the rich. These people are just so backwards thinking.
Decision to decide that. I think that's the end of the story, is that it's not Trump who decides when the due process ends. It's a process for a reason.
Or to unilaterally decide this person is good, this person is bad, because I saw a picture of fake tattoos or whatever it is. You have to have.
They're not fake, by the way.
But he literally committed to following what the Supreme Court says.
But why does
the Supreme
we're
Court
just
said
talking
bring the
about-
man back, and he still has
They said
That's not true. They said facilitate, which is different.
Facilitate. Okay. So I love when people wrestle. As a writer, I love when people wrestle over terms of art.
Has he
it's kinda
facilitated
silly.
it?
They said they would accept him back. I mean, they've made that pretty clear. But that's different than effectuate. It's different than, is it not?
There was a legal standard for facilitating. The Supreme Court said that for a reason, because they could not mandate it, because what if it costs going to war or something? The Supreme Court doesn't have the power to authorize that. That's why the Supreme Court was limited to facilitate, because they could not mandate
Stephen Miller says the right of due process is to protect citizens from their government, not to protect foreign trespassers from removal. Due process guarantees the rights of criminal defendants facing prosecution, not an illegal alien facing deportation, Dante.
Well, I think we just heard from two very well-respected Supreme Court justices that said there's no distinction. If you're in America, you have the right to due process. The levels can be different, and in fact, it is. If you're an immigrant, you're not entitled to the same legal standard that someone else has to prove if you're a citizen in criminal court, which makes it easier, which means he should be willing to say, I have proof that this is a person that needs to leave this country. And if you show that in a court, it's determined, or a hearing, then they have the right to leave. You have the right to remove them. But you can't just randomly pick people and say, everybody's bad.
Not random.
Everybody's bad, so everybody's out, no matter what.
Well, some of them have been random. I think that's why we're having this conversation.
Right.
There's a lot of documented evidence that people have been picked up. The only evidence against them is the existence of tattoos. And that is exactly why due process exists. And I mean, we can talk about Kilmar Abrego all day long, and I think that's a worthy discussion, but you cannot ignore that the other types of cases are happening, and that's one of the reasons why this is in court.
And guys, 80% of the Republican voters, right, the amount of people are white people. And I just think people like Scott Jennings and Batya, that are obviously Republicans, they don't care. This is not a danger to them. If an American citizen gets picked up, it's not going to be one that looks like them. Let's just be real. Trump already said that he wants to deport American citizens to El Salvadorian prisons. Who do you think he would target? I mentioned this before. You best believe he would be going after Chicago and New York looking for black and brown citizens, and would use the same exact argument. Look at their tattoos. They're in gangs. While ignoring the guys with swastikas in their necks.
I want to push back on something that you said about, well, what he meant was, it feels like we play that game with him a lot. He is saying and looking at us and saying and answering the question exactly how he was asked it. And so when we get into this whole, well, he didn't really mean it that way, it's giving him a free pass to basically play these kinds of games.
He was very clear.
You heard him commit to follow the Supreme Court,
He said,
right?
I will follow the Supreme Court,
You heard him
period.
commit to
You
that,
heard him.
right?
He was asked about the Constitution, correct? He was asked about the Constitution.
He was asked about the specific issue regarding Fifth Amendment rights and due process rights. And then he said, okay, we're going to follow the Constitution. We're going to follow the Supreme Court.
Unfortunately, with him, his actions are so loud, it's hard to believe him.
The reason I wanted to play that is because I think Jamel is right? I think it's actually pretty disingenuous to suggest he didn't say what he said. She said to him, Kristen Welker, the Fifth Amendment says that they do have due process rights. And he says, I don't know. It might say that, but if you're talking about that we might have 1 million or 2 million or 3 million trials, look,
it's a legitimate position.
In this country, we teach high schoolers to read the Constitution. Why is it that the standard for the President of the United States seems to be lower?
He has a legitimate policy question about what kind of process it takes to get someone out of the country. He's looking at millions upon millions of people sitting here, some for years upon years going through endless systems, endless paperwork,
but Scott,
and he's asking a legitimate question. It is totally legitimate.
A policy question. It's a constitutional question.
Because
it's not, because they're not saying
because you just said there's different levels of due process.
Absolutely.
And he's asking, do you have to give them this level, or do you have to give them this level? And what's the Supreme Court ultimately going to say about
planes
that?
And sending them away without giving them any kind of hearing.
Well, I agree with Batya. The person that's been in the news had plenty of hearings and plenty of time.
I think it's apparent to people at home that it's easy to divert to Kilmar Abrego Garcia
because he's in the news every day.
I understand that. But I mean, the broader principle is what's at question here. And that's actually what he was asked about, was generally speaking, do people deserve to at least say, hey, that's not me?
Right. Absolutely.
That's a pretty basic question. If someone came to you and said, oh, Scott Jennings, are you the Scott Jennings from Colorado who committed a murder? Wouldn't you want to raise your hand and say, Your Honor, that's not Me.
Well, I'm not a foreign terrorist, and I
If
didn't
someone-
come here
But
illegally.
everybody in this process is not either.
How do you know if
He's so disgusting. He is so disgusting. To me, what he's really saying there is that they wouldn't go after me. Look how I look. Do I look like a foreign terrorist? These people are gross.
they're a foreign terrorist if you don't ask the question?
In the case of
And what
Garcia,
if you get it
we
wrong?
know.
That's the.
We
Like
know.
you're pointing to one case and ignoring all
We
the others.
also have to
just
address
don't want-
this point you keep making about how long it's taken and the pace of the deportations. It wouldn't have taken so long if Donald Trump had not killed the immigration bill that was going to provide more judges to help facilitate more of these things. You can't have it both ways and say it's taken a long time.
More judges,
and also
more
we're not going to
paperwork.
put more
courts.
planes, more prisons in
We'll never get them all out.
in
The message is
South
clear.
America.
We will red tape this to death, and we will never get rid of the invasion.
So you
That's
don't
what
want to. So you run over the Constitution because you're tired and you want to go faster.
In El Salvador or whatever, and they didn't do anything wrong. It was the wrong person.
Right.
Would that matter to you?
I don't think our
It
Garcia was the
shouldn't
wrong
matter.
person.
It shouldn't matter. We're
You
not
can't
talking
answer
about
the
one
question
person.
either, right?
We're talking about generally. It can happen if you don't have due process. And
I
that
would,
shouldn't
I, would,
matter.
I would care if it was the wrong person, but in the case
So
of
the only way to
Garcia,
prevent that
in
is
the
to
case
have
of
a
Garcia, I
process.
have no doubt it was the right person.
So
I
put
have
him to the
little doubt.
side. Put him to the side. If the wrong person is sent, it shouldn't matter.
What's
and the only
what's
way
the
to make sure
circumstances
it's
of
the
wrong
right person
What's the
is to have a
circumstances?
process.
Are they here illegally? Did they have a deportation order? Did they beat their wife? Did they get picked up for
Without a
human
process,
trafficking?
we don't
You tell
know.
me.
You know what,
Without
Scott?
a process,
Actually,
we
I
don't
think
know.
that you're, again, if they have a deportation order, that's actually a different circumstances. A lot of these people, maybe most of them, who they tried to deport under the Alien Enemies Act, it's not clear that they did. So that's part of the problem as well. Look, past presidents have deported a lot of people.
Yes.
Many, many people. And they've done so under the law. So I don't think it's impossible for Trump
I think
to
we're
do
living
the
in
same.
an unprecedented situation.
All
That's
right,
my view.
Don.
And he wasn't charged with beating anyone. Like, these people are gross. I wish in those situations when it's getting that contentious, just push it back to him. What if they were Jewish people? What if they start going to, this idiot likes focusing on Jewish campuses, universities and campuses, and, the quote-unquote anti-Semitism going on there. Put it to him like that. What if they just start picking up Jewish kids from colleges and universities and start deporting them? Should they deserve their due process? Unbelievable. But let me give you my spiel, my thoughts here on this. Right. Again, these undocumented immigrants commit crimes at a lower rate than Americans, lower percentage rate. I had a dumbass Republican in the comments saying, there's way more Americans. Of course, they're committing crimes at larger numbers. Lower rate, percentage rate, Republicans. I know that's hard for you to understand. But again, and it's not because they are sweet angels that are holier than thou. It's because they don't want to get deported, especially from where they're from. They want to work hard and have a chance at a decent life. Think about this. Put yourself in these people's positions. Who wouldn't do that? A brutal life, full of crime in some of these countries, no money, no opportunities for work. Isn't that what we all strive for? A better life for you, your family? And it's easy to be from the U.S. and say you should go back to your country. You're illegally here. As an American, that's really easy when you don't have to go back to El Salvador. And the only difference from these people who come here legally and illegally, 9 out of 10 times, it's a money thing. You're able to afford lawyers, sending your kid to college here, able to pay for this process and that process. These people that come from southern the border, they have not a penny to their name. Where's your humanity and empathy? You shave their heads and throw them into a El Salvadoran prison. Some of these people are not even from that country. And that's not to say, let the borders open and let everyone in. As a Hispanic, I don't believe that's sustainable, obviously. But I think we should simply look into how many undocumented workers we may need each year for different jobs, different sectors of the economy, where we may have a shortage, and give them a path to citizenship after a certain amount of years. You want to grow the economy, this is one way to do it, thinking like this. You don't just deport 20 million people. But instead, these assholes, they bend over for billionaires who are actually the ones sucking the money out of the American people. don't work hard whatsoever and just whine like a bunch of little, you know what, when people want an increase in things like minimum wage or for them to get finally pay their fair share in taxes. I mean, I'm sorry, but I think the U.S. would be much better deporting those billionaire, ultra-rich pricks than the undocumented immigrant from south of the border who's just working hard and just trying to get a better life like all of us. But I'm going to leave it there. That's my spiel on it all. Let me know what you think in the comments about all of this. Please leave a like, subscribe. It really helps the channel, really helps push the message forward. And I'll catch you in the next one.